Welcome, Community Cop. My name is Julian Harper, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here with my two co-hosts. First of all, Noel Leader.
Hotep family.
Second of all, Michael Greys, aka Big Mike.
Namaste.
And as you know, we always have our in-house historian give us some African history. So Mike, I know that 9/6/1880 was the birthday of A.J. Rogers.
Yeah, J.A. Rogers, one of the greatest historians we've ever produced, was the one that started Negro History Week, which is now African Liberation Month or Black History Month, commonly called. Certainly this brother's books, whether it's the Superman the Man, Sex and Race, just whatever books you read by J.A. Rogers is relevant even to this very day. All of the books that he wrote going back to the 30s and 40s, books were incredible. J.A. Rogers, you know, strong brother, found out who he was just from research, and we should never forget that name, J.A. Rogers.
And don't forget his book, 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro as well, where he talks about a whole lot of amazing facts that a lot of people haven't heard about. And they don't teach, probably none of the stuff in this book do they teach during African history, Black History Month.
Mm. Okay, and also Mike, on 9/4/1957, the anniversary of Little Rock 9.
Yeah, the Little Rock 9, certainly a centerpiece in our history. This was the first time that Brown v. Board was actually exercised. In 1954, you know, Thurgood Marshall and his team won, you know, a movement that was started by, you know, Charles Hamilton Houston, but finished by Thurgood Marshall. So you have that decision in 54, and the first time it's really practiced was in Little Rock, Arkansas, desegregating a white school. So 9 children, high school age, went to that high school, which actually was the high school also of future President Bill Clinton, who was there at, you know, it was there at that time. So you have a situation where President Eisenhower had to send in the 82nd Airborne. The hostility was so great, and America could ill afford those 9 children being killed because it was so hostile, and he didn't trust that the governor and the local National Guard could protect them. So he sent in the 82nd Airborne to take them to and from school every day. And that was a piece that was saw all around the world. The entire world watched as 9 children came in on a school bus every day, had to be escorted off by the 82nd Airborne, and had to be protected while they were in the school and certainly outside the school grounds. And you saw white parents in an uproar like Russia had just invaded America or something. They were so enraged, and of course the N-word was used and everything under the sun. And this is why you had U.S. senators even later in discussing segregation and desegregating schools. That's why Biden was one of them that said he didn't want big, burly, overgrown black boys sitting next to little white girls because of that type of situation. So that paranoia was first exercised in Little Rock in 1957, and we should never forget that.
And Michael, did you say Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden?
Joe Biden, I think he's from Delaware. He said that. He called them overgrown black boys.
And he made some
next to little white girls.
He made some more derogatory statements at the time. Of course, one of the things that we see is that politicians their positions always change when they put their finger in the wind. But I just want to make a small commentary on that particular event, Michael, when you talked about the 82nd Airborne having to come to the school to escort the children. And we're talking about children. And when you talk about the parents of the white parents of that particular school, they were not only angry at the legislatures for enacting school desegregation, but they manifested their anger towards the children. They were so disrespectful towards the children. They were so threatening towards the children who were just, a byproduct of this particular legislation, and were told that they had to integrate this particular white school. White mothers, white parents, and white fathers were so disrespectful, so discourteous, so threatening, so racist towards children going on their way to school, which is just an inkling, just a manifestation of white America. And as me and Julian was talking earlier, all communities have dysfunctional people, but you will never see Black parents beating by the hundreds to threaten, to call racial epithets at white children, to disrespect. And you will never in American history see that emanating from the Black community.
There's a real deep hatred, disdain, dehumanization of African people. And like you said, Noel, this goes beyond African-American Black adults. They have no concern for our youth, for our children, for our babies. And it is just so horrific that any parent would have to watch and hear, and any child have to be subjected to such horrendous words and hatred in response by anyone. So, Michael, thank you for bringing those points up. And
I'm sorry, just 2 points pop in my head real quick. I'll be real quick. You could imagine how it affected the children, when they had to prepare to go to school, the anxiety they had to feel. You can imagine how it affected them when they were in school trying to learn. And then, my final point is this hatred, this disrespect, this racism emanating from these parents, you better believe it was transferred onto their children who grow up today to be adults, who unfortunately pass it down. And that's why we still stuck in this mire of racial animosity in America, because it's parental.
Right. And unfortunately, when you talk about how it affected them in school, there are long-term psychological effects when people are subjected to these ills and this hatred. So again, thank you, gentlemen, for both parts. I just wanted to mention that on September 3rd, 1838, Frederick Douglass escaped from slavery disguised as a sailor. And what's interesting about, first of all, the fact that he had an opportunity to escape, but he was often asked, how did he feel when he first felt the ground of free soil? And one of his statements was, or a couple of his statements was, he said he felt that he had more in one day of freedom than he did in a year, or he lived a life, one day of freedom than 1 year as a slave. He also said he felt as if one might have felt upon escaping from a den of angry lions. He felt how one might feel. Now imagine being, and we can just imagine what someone would feel how someone would feel being in a den of angry lions. And he said he felt like that person once they had escaped those horrific atrocities. So, I bring these points up because sometimes when we look at either movies or someone is talking about the history of slavery, they try to sugarcoat it. They try to make it sound as if, it was a hard time, but they made it through. And, Frederick Douglass described it as being in the den of hungry lions. So, we really need to understand how horrific that time was. And I know because we never had the opportunity to really be educated on the real effects of slavery through European education, education in the United States of America. So we can't really grasp, at least I don't think, the real effects and the feelings of it. So, that's why I wanted to bring that point out.
And you can only imagine being in a den of, feeling as if you're in a den of lions every day of your existence. That is a pathetic existence. And to the chagrin of individuals like Kanye West, who claims that African Americans were resolved to remain in that slave condition, individuals like Frederick Douglass, who had the strength to leave. Can you imagine being born and raised on a plantation, never seeing the outside world, don't know where you're going, don't know how far you have to travel, but you say, I just got to get out of here. So, you know, it ought to be understood that there were thousands of Africans, enslaved Africans, who attempted to escape. Some were successful in escaping. And, you know, there were revolts on slave ships. There was murders, slave murders, plantation owners. You know, so individuals like Kanye West, you know, need to pay a little more attention to Michael Graves, our in-house historian, which would tell the true story of the enslavement of African Americans. But big kudos to Frederick Douglass.
And I'll just add to this by saying that certainly I can understand the words that he used to describe slavery as if in the lion's den, because death is ever so near. But our existence here in 2020, so many of us are still playing to this very day, beat the clock, depending on our circumstances. Death is always near. It is always around the corner. Some of us just coming outside the door. Look no further than Tamir Rice. Who could anticipate a little 12-year-old boy playing in a playground right across from the school? And you're playing with a toy gun, it's sticking out of your back pocket, and two grown men, police officers, fly right up, pull right up to you, jump out of a car. Within less than 2 seconds, one is pulling out his weapon and firing it at Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old child. So we're playing beat the clock to this very day, certainly different from Frederick Douglass. However, is comparable, even though I would maintain and have no problem saying that our worst day on this planet is better than Frederick Douglass or Harriet Tubman's best day in slavery. So we don't have a lot to complain about, even though it is our historical mandate to keep the struggle going. But I certainly can identify with Fred Douglass' words. And let me quickly say before I forget that it was his wife that set up the scenario that caused his freedom. So she set the whole thing up. His wife, who was a free Black woman, but gave herself to an enslaved Black man. It was her that set the whole thing up. So big props to his wife.
All right. Michael, one of our first topics, an Arkansas sheriff by the name of Todd Wright resigned from his position after it was found out that he made a statement, a derogatory statement to his wife, calling her a N lover.
Well, it was his girlfriend.
I'm sorry, his girlfriend, who calling her a N lover because she was speaking to an employee in a grocery store who happened to be a male Black.
Well, yeah. Now you have to remember, he's the sheriff. And to those that might not understand that, he is in charge. So all the deputies are under him. So for all intents and purposes, he's like their commissioner. So the sheriff, who's in charge of that county, you know, Arkansas County, he was secretly recorded while he was talking to his girlfriend who worked in a supermarket. So when he walked into the supermarket, she was actually speaking to a Black man who was shopping in the supermarket. So he, just from seeing her talking to him, he told her, "Why are you effing talking to that nigga?" You know, saying, "What's wrong with you?" And he went on to tell her that, "Don't you understand that since you're my girlfriend, when they see you, they see me. Consequently, you should not be talking to him." he went on to say that with all the people in the store, why are you talking to a black man? And why would you even talk to him if I'm around? So that only shows you how sick he was. This was secretly recorded. Consequently, he was asked to resign. Now, this is in a county that's 25% black.
That's right.
So he was asked to resign. He, in turn, did not want to resign. He had a court date for last Friday. At the court date, he wouldn't resign, and then allegedly a friend told him to resign because they had it set up that they was going to keep him on the payroll. And since they kept him on the payroll after he resigned, the courts that he was in voted unanimously to allow him to continue to get paid without being fired, respecting his resignation until June 30th. I mean, September the 30th, which is around Labor Day. So he was told, I mean, which is past Labor Day, all the way to the end of this month. So he was told that he would be paid. And by that time, he will all more than likely hook up with another law enforcement agency in the nearby area. He wasn't fired. And one thing I really like about Noel Leader, he has always talked about these officers that are caught like that should not have the luxury of resigning. They should be fired. It should be something in their folder, in their paperwork, so that when they apply to the next law enforcement agency, that agency can see that this person is going on record that he hates black people.
That's right.
So he was able to, and I've never heard of, this is the second time where I heard of a situation where you're resigned, but you're still on the payroll. The other one was when an abusive cop was fired for deadly physical force, but yet they kept his pregnant wife on the payroll getting benefits, as you recall, Noel.
Yeah, I remember that.
Now, Michael.
Two times this happened.
And
You're not supposed to stay on the payroll once you resign or you fired, and you certainly not supposed to be, your wife can't be on your benefits on the payroll when you were fired for killing somebody.
Now, Michael, now listen, now this, like you said, this was the mother of his children. Her name was Desiree Middlebrooks. Now they had recorded him going, now they reported as him being ballistic. He used the N-word 9 times, screaming at her, you know, because she was speaking to, now it reads that he was an employee of the grocery store, you know, as the story's told, as it's reported. And she was talking to him. Now, for him to have such a disdain for African people, and for him to be an employee of a town that 25% of the people are of African-American descent, I mean, what type of law enforcement response could he possibly give this community if he has such a disdain for African people?
Well, if he hates black people that much and can talk to white people in such a way to let him know his disdain, then if it's 75% white, then I think that his actions, his demeanor, the way he comports himself is being reinforced by a significant amount of people in that community. Now, his girlfriend asked him, what's the big deal? You hear on the recording saying, what's the big deal me speaking to him? However, I think that members of the, obviously in that courtroom, wanted him to still get paid, and they didn't want anything on his record to hurt his chances of hooking up with another law enforcement agency. And certainly it's reinforced as he goes here and there. I think that attitude that he has been reinforced.
yeah, and we frequently say correctly that these individuals should be terminated as opposed to allowed to resign, because a lot of these agencies that are close, they feign as if they were not aware of their previous incident, which caused them to resign. You know, they just put down resign and not fired. That's why it's important to put down terminated on people's resume when they were fired. But, you know, of course, you know, the administration offers don't want to mess up these guys' opportunity to join another department. But a few important things that have to be brought out of this incident, as you stated, Julian and Michael. You know, here we have a non-confrontational situation. It's not as if he was in a brawl, not to say that it would be excused if he was, but there was no need for him to be that outraged other than he's just a white racist, a white supremacist. He's in the commercial, he's in the public, in the store, and his girlfriend just had a brief conversation with an employee who happens to be African-American, and he got so outraged. So here you have the individual who's responsible for setting the tone and tenet of a department, of an agency. You can only imagine, that this is not the first time he articulated this kind of derogatory comments against African-Americans. Clearly he's done it before, most likely in front of his subordinates. And, we have to ask ourselves in the African-American community, why do individuals like this repeatedly and consistently get the head law enforcement departments around the country? Like, how is he given that position when he manifests this level of disrespect and disdain, as you guys said, for and racism towards the African-American community? And I would submit that most agencies, most mayors, most legislatures, and many citizens, they want these kind of individuals to lead their police departments because some people would say they keep us in check. But this happened all over the country where we find sheriffs and heads of departments, a member of the Ku Klux Klan or Ku Klux Klan sympathizers, or they order their men to arrest Black people. And I always press that this concept of a few bad apples, man, we have to stop saying that. This is not a few bad apples. The entire tree is rotting at the root, and racism and white supremacy has overtaken many police departments around the country, including the New York City Police Department.
And for the record, they're saying it's unclear at this time as to him belonging to a larger race, a racist organization or group. So the odds are they know he belongs to some group in that town and surrounding area, some type of a right-wing extremist group, but they said it's unclear at this time, which means they know, but they're not saying.
All right. Our next topic, Noel, Kyle Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old shooter in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Now, they said his first victim was shot in the back, and they had some more information relative to the shooting as well.
Right, just an update on the murderer, the young murderer, Kyle. I have to say his name right before I get beat up. Kyle Rittenhouse. The autopsy of his first victim has come in, and it was determined that he was shot in the back. Of course, his supporters, which include the President of the United States, are claiming that it was an act of self-defense. I don't know how you are defending yourself when you shoot somebody in the back. But he also has received over $300,000 via the GoFundMe fund that was established by a Christian organization called the Domestic Terrorism for Jesus. So they have taken up his cause, even though, in spite of the fact that it's on TV, it's on video, it's on the internet, they are claiming that he's a victim. Here you have a 17-year-old man, a young individual who didn't even live in this county, traveled to this county with a AR-15 machine gun, and they claim that there's some justification in that. And then to follow up, the last point is the Chief Dan, who's the chief of the police department over there. He said his officers did nothing wrong when he was questioned as to why did they allow him to leave the scene after murdering two people, walking right past 3 or 4 carloads of police officers with the AR-15 across his chest with his hands up in the air, when he was critiqued and questioned as to why his officers didn't even stop to investigate. They had calls of shots fired. They didn't even stop and investigate. He said his officers did nothing wrong under the circumstances, and he made a couple of excuses for the police officers, which is totally unacceptable But we have to look at this incident for what it is. Not only the 17-year-old thug, murderer, animal, whatever, adjective you want to use, that's what they would have used if he was an African-American, of course, and we see that frequently. Not only do you have this individual murdering two protesters, but you have a whole lot of cover. So this sympathy that he's receiving is only a manifestation, is that his mindset is shared by many in the white community.
Well, also, Arizona State University had a fundraiser.
I was getting ready to say that. Well, go ahead.
Okay. All right, yeah. So, there are a number of groups that are supporting this murderer. So we have to realize there is a real mindset that is in position to support and protect white supremacists. We have to respond accordingly. We have to be sure that we look at these groups, these people who are in positions to teach our children, who are in positions to ensure the safety or the protections of our communities, who are supporting white supremacists, who are looking to oppress African people. We have to keep our eyes, our minds, and our hearts open, and we have to respond accordingly. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, just wanted to point out that Noel mentioned one organization that has raised over $300,000. It's an organization on Arizona State University campus, a conservative organization called the College Republicans United. Most of the times when you hear the code word, when you hear the word conservative, it's a code word for racist. So this organization is a Christian organization that's raising funds for his legal defense. Now they're saying that that Kyle Rittenhouse, who's a resident of Antioch, Illinois, did nothing wrong. Now I think Noel claimed that he killed two people and wounded a third.
Right.
Well, this Christian organization is saying something different from you, Noel. So y'all are at variance.
Yes, sir.
They're saying he did nothing wrong. They went on to say he does not deserve to have his entire life destroyed because of actions of violent anarchists during a lawless riot. Now, it seems that the protesters were peaceful. He got in the game and started shooting. It wasn't any shooting prior to him. So this Christian organization is saying he did nothing wrong. They went on to say he should not have his life ruined for lawless anarchists. So they're putting the value of one life over another. Now they're saying that his life will be ruined if he goes to jail because he's being charged with first-degree intentional homicide and also a first-degree reckless homicide, besides wounding somebody really bad. So why is his life so valuable that it'll be ruined? And they went on to say that he's not a vigilante. He was helping a city in chaos. So killing two people and wounding another person, there's some moral equivalency in protecting a city in chaos. Well, there's a whole lot of black people they claim killed somebody that can also say they weren't vigilantes also. So here you got Christian organization. Now, I say to you humbly that the white church is different from the black church.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna say it again.
Yes, sir.
The white church is different from the black church. You won't find a black church anywhere that will openly raise funds for a black man who just killed two people. that went to a peaceful demonstration, a protest, and even if it wasn't 100% peaceful, if he killed 2 people while he was there and wounded a 3rd one, they are not going to raise funds for him. Now, this is the same white church that had no problem in enslaving black men, women, and children. They had no problem taking children from their mothers and selling them. They had no problem whipping them, beating them, or ordered them to be hung. It was a white woman, in fact, who beat Harriet Tubman over her head. Harriet Tubman had dizzy spells the rest of her life, which means her brain was wounded internally by the blows she received from a white woman who claimed she was stealing some bread that she baked, by the way. She cooked and cleaned, and the white woman allegedly caught her stealing bread and beat her and concussed her brain, where Harriet Tubman received dizzy spells the rest of her life. Now, this church condoned all of that. The only white group, and I can't say all of them, but the only white group of record that was against slavery were the Quakers. Baptist, Catholic, every other Christian denomination under the sun never took a moral position against slavery. So I'm saying now that the white church, they have no problem calling this person a hero, saying this person is innocent, saying that this person was defending himself with the AR-15 across his chest, and everybody else, no weapons. Now, yeah, he shot white people. That don't mean that he wasn't shooting into a crowd that had white and black people there, but the people the 2 people he killed, I think were white, or one of them was white.
Both of them were white.
Both of them were white, right?
Noel, can I ask you a question?
Yes,
Noel,
sir.
Now, this young man was 17 years old, right?
I want to get back to the white church, though.
You get back to that, Mike. Noel, let me just ask you a question. He was 17 years old. And you earlier were talking about how white parents teach their children to hate, to be part of these groups that have a disdain for African people, that are killing African people. Now, it's a possibility that this murderer had learned this through his family, through his mother, through his father. Like, he didn't wake up one morning and decide that he's going to buy an AR-15 and go out there. This had to be either taught or somewhere. I don't know whether it was over the internet or his family, but there is a connection between these youth who have this train of thought and the people that teach them and the adults that they're around.
Right. Well, you know, everyone says your mother, your parents, and your mother in particular are your first teachers. You know, there's a lot of information, a lot of photos on the internet shows that his parents clearly introduced him to this kind of philosophy that he had. His mother was stated to have driven him. Here you have a 17-year-old with an AR-15 automatic weapon, drove him to the scene. And you can only imagine that conversations to the scene, but it's highly inappropriate for a parent to do that. I mean, regardless of how you view this particular incident, you know, to have this young man and Mike, I think they alleging that one of the individuals in the crowd might have had a weapon, one of the individuals that he's wounded, not that he murdered. I'm not certain if that's clear. They had some photo over the internet of some picture. But even if that was the case, he fired, the person he killed was shot in the back. When these groups, including the president, say that he was justified, you lose the defense of justification after you commit a murder. In other words, I can't murder somebody. And once people, civilians, you know, chase after me, to apprehend me, to grab me, to whatever, I don't say, well, I have a right to defend myself against them because I just murdered somebody. Those individuals who are on video attempting to apprehend him when he shot the second person, You know, for all intent and purposes, civilians have a right to make a citizen's arrest or make a citizen's apprehension when they, in fact, observe an individual commit a felony. In this case, you know, he murdered somebody, and they were saying, yo, he shot somebody, he shot somebody. So they had a right to apprehend him. They had a right to put hands on him to grab him. So, you know, that explanation of self-defense, he loses that. He's a criminal. He should have been apprehended by the police officers. So, you know, this as we all stated earlier, you know, the way this is being played out, you know, the line being drawn in the sand and individuals jumping on his side of the line is totally inappropriate. You know, you do not drive, and to your point, Julie, you do not drive your 17-year-old child at a very heated protest, a very heated demonstration, knowing he has an AR-15, and then you drive off and go back home and leave him there. That's only a reflection of what kind of parents he had.
Well, again, I would say that the conditioning, the teaching in a black church and the teaching in a white church is as different as night and day. They don't see a problem with what he did. They have deputized their own. See, they are white first. See, in the black church, we can even kneel down and pray to a Jesus that looks white. And Dr. Bennett, Dr. Clark says no people will ever advance if your deity and your enemy looks alike. You can't advance, you can't even fight. That's why Malcolm said you can't even fight the person that's trying to destroy you and your family if it looks like God. So this sickness that is permeating through the black community, that an opposite and totally permeates throughout the white community. This is why white churches supported Zimmerman, even though he killed outright Trayvon Martin. He had the gun. He was the grown man. He was the wannabe guy that wanted to be a police officer one day. And he was told to stand down by the 911 operator. Yet the church found a way to support him. Yet whites across the country found a way to support him. Now, why don't those whites question the DA? Why did the DA charge him with first-degree murder and another murder charge if he was protecting a city in chaos? Well, they know fully well, based on the color of law, that he's guilty of something, that he did something and he's going to be tried for it. But that only shows you the difference in the white church and the black church, because I dare say that the white church is white first, and that if it goes against what is written in the Bible, so be it, because they're going to be white first and they're going to be in charge, and they're willing to die before they allow black people to have power over them. They have demonstrated time and time again. They're military leaders, they're political leaders, they're business leaders, they're church leaders. All have demonstrated they will die before they allow black people to rule over them or to even share power with them.
Let me make a closing comment, my closing comment on this subject. And Michael, your point is well taken. We talked many times that Europeans, be they Jew or Gentile, will put down the tenets of their religion. And I'm talking about those who claim to be religious. They will put down their religion if there's a threat to their world dominance. It's a threat to their power. The religion says thou shalt not kill, but they will kill if they feel that they have to kill in order to maintain dominance. It says thou shalt not steal. They will steal natural resources. They will invade, et cetera, et cetera. So point well taken. But on this particular subject, Julian and Mike, we have to see, although he was arrested, all of the pouring of this sympathy and these excuses that are being concocted, to claim that this individual is justified. Don't forget, if you have a sympathetic district attorney, a sympathetic prosecutor, although he was arrested, they can throw the case by presenting a lackluster prosecution.
That's right.
You have the judges. You have to worry about the jury pool who may be sympathetic. So, this is not over simply because he was arrested and charged, and we have to keep the heat on and demand that he's not only prosecuted, but he's convicted and appropriately sentenced.
Now, when we talk about these particular cases, the people who are in charge, either in the arrest or whether it's in the court system, whether it's in the prosecution of the case, they have sometimes shown biases.
Oh,
now, the Kenosha sheriff, who was in part of this investigation, what's going on in Wisconsin, in 2018, he took some heat after he made a comment. After a no mercy rant about a group of shoplifters. Now, we talking people who committed shoplifting, which could be a petty offense, at least in New York. He said that these people aren't worth saving. He said that these people should be arrested and they should be put away for the rest of their lives. He wanted to use a warehouse, put them inside a warehouse and have them put away for the rest of their lives. So and these were black people that he was talking about, who had committed this minor offense or this offense of shoplifting. These people have no sense of fairness, equity, or balance when we talk about law enforcement. So how could we expect these people to be fair? And I'm talking about, when I say these people, I'm talking about this sheriff and these people who are in charge of this law enforcement community in Kenosha, Wisconsin. How can we expect them to be fair and just when they walk into these cases with biases, when they have already made statements that show that they have a sense of disdain for African people, where they can't be fair, where he feels that they should be put into warehouses and put away for the rest of their lives. He said they shouldn't be allowed to have children. I mean, this man has shown how he has such a disdain for African people, but meanwhile, he is in charge of investigations that affect African people in the community that he polices. Noel?
Yeah, and Julian, you mentioned that he made this statement in 2018. This is 2020, and he's still in position. Exactly. So clearly, his constituents, those individuals responsible for putting him in that position, do not find his comments outrageous, which indeed they were. And also, in order to be pointed out, that when Donald Trump recently visited Wisconsin, he was in the audience. But as you stated, his language was filled with cold words. When he talked about these people, and he talked about stop them from impregnating 10 women, and they ought to be warehoused. I mean, this is the language of Nazi Germany when you talk about warehousing people. He said they ought to be put in jail for forever. No recreational activity. He's really saying that he wanted black people to be put on concentration camps. So that's basically what he's saying. As you stated, Julian, the accusation against these individuals is that they committed a petty larceny, which is a minor, although it is a crime, it is a minor crime. Yet he had so much animosity and utter hatred, and described what ought to happen to them in such draconian tense. Warehouse. And then we talked about it earlier. He's the sheriff. This is the man in charge of this particular agency. This is his mentality, and he's responsible for setting the tone and the tenet for his fellow officers. So that's why here on this program, or Community Cop, we not only call for police reform, but this entire system, this entire criminal justice system has to be reformed. This entire system, because it's replete with white supremacists, white racists, who under the tenure of Donald Trump feel very comfortable in articulating a racial hatred. And once they expose that, once they manifest that, they definitely should not be in a position of public service or leading an agency where they can affect, their subordinates. But, as you say to Julian, this occurred, he made these comments in 2018. In 2020, he still hold his same position.
Yeah, I would just say that he's indicative of, he's what you would call a man of his times. He is in probably that 75 percentile of his constituents, he's in lockstep with them. So there's not a problem with respect to agreeing or disagreeing. They know how he feels about the situation. If he said that in 2018 and he's still there now, that's proof positive that his attitude, he doesn't mind showing it publicly, and it is well with their souls. It's similar to and reminiscent of Rudolph Giuliani, who, when we formed 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care, he was the mayor of New York City. He did not mind letting everybody know how he felt about Black men, women, and children. As a matter of fact, he didn't like Latinos either. When a Latino mother was grieving and called him on his radio program, he told her to stop whining because they, NYPD killed her son. I think it was Iris Baez, or one of them had called in, and he told her to stop whining. And so it wasn't only with Black people, but I would also say that what he did with the Million Youth March, led by Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad, and we were there, and he actually sicked the police department on a peaceful crowd gathered in Harlem and had a helicopter drop down to as low as the 3rd floor. And we could actually look up from where we were standing, 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement. We looked up and could actually see the officer in the helicopter, which started the crowd to scamper. And you had children out there. You had babies in carriages. So and you had the police moving toward the crowd, attacking from the back of the stage. And people started scampering, and people could have really got hurt. And Rudolph Giuliani went on television, letting it be known it was not a police commander who, in fact, gave that order. He wanted everyone to know he gave that order for the troops to come in and for that helicopter to drop down on the crowd. He wanted everybody to know he wanted Black people to rebel in such a way that he would ride that wave all the way to the White House. So he wanted a problem, even though there was none.
Noel, now staying along with this same case, the police chief said that his officers didn't do anything wrong when they allowed this 17-year-old to walk by, carry this long rifle. The police chief said this. Again, someone who's in charge of enforcing laws to ensure that the safety of everyone in that community is paramount.
Yeah, and that's why we should be concerned about, the prosecution, because he's receiving so much compassion. People are making all sorts of explanations and excuses for his behavior. It's highly inappropriate to hear a police chief, ones who's responsible for enforcing the law fairly, to claim that this individual who just shot and killed 2 people, wounded another, is innocent, and the officers did nothing wrong when they didn't arrest him. I mean, we all know that had he been African American and if officers were responding to calls of shot fired and they seen a Black man with an AR-15 or AK-47 across his chest, at a minimum he would have been stopped. I mean, there's a good possibility that he would have been shot. But at minimum, he would have been stopped, questioned, and he's coming from the direction of the shooting because officers were going into the direction. So when you have a sheriff claim that his officers did nothing wrong and not apprehended him, and they even had a conversation with him. They said, "Yo, is anybody hurt back there?" They said that to the man who hurt them. So for the police sheriff to say that his officers did nothing wrong is highly inappropriate, but it's simply a manifestation of his attempting to show some compassion for the shooter, most likely because he believes with his political stance of coming down there, with others from militias and other organizations with heavy artillery claiming to protect, the commercial stores down there. He probably agreed with their political position. So when they act inappropriately, he gives them cover by claiming, that they didn't do anything wrong, and then excusing his police officers. Julian, you and I and Michael as well know from law enforcement's background, the actions of the police officers was very inappropriate. It was comical. It was amateurish. You have a murderer walk right past you, and you don't even stop questioning officers. I mean, he wound up going home. He wound up being arrested the next day. Highly inappropriate.
Like the Keystone Cops.
Exactly.
Michael, let me ask you. In Los Angeles on Monday, there was a man who was arrested by the name of, he was shot and killed by police by the name of Dejon Kizzy. Allegedly, he was riding a bike. He made some traffic infraction on his bike. He got into a physical confrontation with the police. He ran. As he was fleeing the police, he dropped some clothing that he was holding. And apparently, or allegedly, there was a gun rolled up or somehow attached to the clothing. And when it dropped, the police shot him and killed him.
Well, yeah, what happened was they had a setup sort of like a conditions officer where if you ride by on your bike, they could stop you. And it was called the bicycle code violation, where when he went by, they checked him and tracked him down. Now, he had a bundle of clothes in his arm when the confrontation occurred. Allegedly, there was a confrontation. And when he dropped his clothes because his attire was so loosely fit that his pants kept falling down. So when he tried, to whatever he was doing with the police officer, his clothes dropped out of his hands. And at the same time, he's trying to pull his pants up. And allegedly, a gun fell out of the bundle of clothes that he was carrying. When the officers saw that the gun hit the ground, 2 officers opened up and shot him. Now, if the gun was on the ground and you see a man struggling to pull up his pants, he's holding his pants with one arm, he is not a threat. So there was no need to shoot him in the back. So the witnesses said that he didn't pose a threat. So to shoot 5 or more times, killing him for, again, a bicycle code violation made absolutely no sense.
Well, of course, this is going to be a interesting story. The supporters of the police officers are saying this man was armed, and therefore, officers had a justification for firing a weapon. But in no one's, what I'm reading about this particular story, in no one's version of this event was a weapon ever put in his hand in terms where he can fire and assault or harm the police officers. They claim, and I'm not even certain if their claim is 100% accurate, that he was in possession of a weapon. At no time did they say he had it in his hand, he had it in the firing motion, and that there was a threat. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. I know he was shot a number of times in the back.
Yeah.
And once again, for those individuals who are make all types of excuses for police officers. We know officers have a very difficult job. We know that police officers, can be killed while performing their duties. But we always have to remember that if individuals are engaged in criminality or criminal act, the officers are not judge and jury. We're responsible with making an arrest, bringing these individuals in, allowing a judge and the jury to decide their fate. Far too often what we're seeing is police officers acting as judge and jury. And this is what is most appalling. So for those who claim that he was in possession of a weapon, if he was, the police officers, unless they felt their life was in imminent danger or a civilian's life was in imminent death, danger of death or serious physical injury, they had no legal justification for firing their weapon. Officers are not judge and jury. So, we'll see how this pans out. We'll keep the community cop family posted on how this pans out. You better believe that, there'll be a great attempt to conjure up emotions, by if he was in possession of a weapon, they're just focused on that point. But it'll be interesting to see if the police officers are claiming that they were in fear of an imminent threat of danger, meaning that he had the possession in his hand and they felt that he was turning on them or about to turn on them, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, I have so many thoughts in my head of stories that they can come up with, but I'm
Right.
refusing to put them out there right now.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to give anybody any ammunition.
So, Julian, trust you me, there's the PBA attorneys with his hand on his pants, maybe he's going for another weapon.
Exactly.
His legal authority, his legal attorney.
I don't want to talk about it. But
they already know that, Hawk. If me and you think about it, as attorneys already, these people are professional excuse makers. They gonna come up with a whole lot of excuses. But yeah, the point won't take it, Hawk.
Exactly. We only have a little time left, so I want to just get out this last story. A Maryland elected official or official for government in Maryland was fired from his post, defending charges of this same 17-year-old in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He said, one of the statements he said was, I'm sorry, first of all, his name was Arthur McLove the fourth. He made a statement, he said, "Don't be a thug if you can't take the slug." So he's saying that the people who are out there protesting, don't be out there protesting if you're not willing to get shot and die for what you're protesting for. And that is just such an insane statement to justify what happened where a 17-year-old had shot and killed 2 people and injured someone else. Now, one of the things because he worked directly for the governor, Harry Hogan, he worked under his administration. And one of the positions he once held a position that saw over the Commission on African American History and Culture. It is so disturbing to me that these people who are in position and have power over monies, over the livelihood, over things that affect our community, have such a negative and a disdain for members of our community. They have no respect for our community, but meanwhile, they're in positions that affect us very, very strongly, whether it's economically, whether it's through the ability of us to go to jail, and that's very problematic. So we really have to be staunch when we talk about the politics of our community. We have to be very strong. Noel?
And the Bible says, I may not quote exactly, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. When people make such outrageous comments such as that, that's a reflection of who they are. So many people are against the Black Lives Matter protests in many of these states. And, they are going back to an era where you shoot first and ask questions later. They're providing all sorts of justification of physical violence against the protesters because they are against the protests. And, they're getting draconian. They're going back to the Stone Age for saying that, listen, if you participate in these protests, and even if you loot, if you break into a store, that you have a right to be shot and killed, by whether it's law enforcement or in this case a civilian. And I think that's a sad commentary to where we are in 2020.
And I'm really looking forward to seeing the results of this so-called investigation and the prosecution of this particular case, because he's getting support, as you stated, Noel, earlier, from the President of the United States.
That's right.
From multiple members of political positions, and members of the community, as Mike stated, members of the clergy, members of the church. This is going to be very interesting. But we're running out of time, so it's time for closing arguments. Michael Graves.
Yeah, just want to again commend the brothers in the NBA and those who expressed in the NFL. I think they should have been supportive of Colin Kaepernick, but big ups to them. And last but not least, the sisters of the WNBA. They have been the strongest and the boldest of them all in their position. So just want to thank them so much for lending their support to the movement Black man, black woman, protect the black child, accept your own and be yourself.
Noel?
Yeah, although I'm not a fan of testing, okay. Although I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, one of probably the only good thing about his presidency is that the awareness in the African-American community, the activism in the African-American community is raised to a higher level. Conversation on the internet and elsewhere as it relates to this, not only law enforcement, but racism throughout the society, as Michael just said, is even in professional sports now. This is a result of Donald Trump's presidency. And I'm just afraid that if Biden is elected, we're going to think everything is fine. We're going to fall back to sleep. But Lenny Lou, Kitty Cat, Little More, I love you. Peace.
Listen, you know, I concur with Mike. You know, when you talk about the people in sports, and we can even talk about in the media, actors, a lot of professionals, some of the young sisters, tennis players. I mean, multiple people are really stepping up and voicing their opinion about the disdain that they have for the treatment of African people. And I concur with you, Michael. You know, I read somewhere where they talked about Colin Kaepernick being the father of these sports members of the sports world for the work that he's done, and he should definitely be supported. And I commend him for the work that he did. You know, he's like the father of it relative to sports. But I know we're running out of time. Harper family, Darlene, Sharon, thank you for watching. I thank you for your support. The Leader family, Greys family, Veronica Kitt, Big D, Nat Wood, Sheila Berry. I mean, you guys are doing a phenomenal job. We greatly appreciate what you guys are doing, getting this show going. Thank you so much. And Community Cop family, please keep watching. We love you guys, and we try to recognize everyone for supporting us, and we're going to be here for you. Thank you so much. Keep watching.
Peace.
All right.